The world has changed. Where there was once light, there now shines darkness. Deep and foreboding like a black hole sun. Perhaps this is a long overdue punishment from God for our sins. The end times to end all end times. Or perhaps this is the result of me stealing a cursed artifact and unknowingly unleashing the god of chaos onto the earth to reap havoc and destruction. But who's to say for sure? All I can do now is hope to atone and fix my mistake before it's too late. Hopefully this will be the key to our salvation.
Nope, I think I just made it worse. Well, I better make this quick then.
It's the early 2000s, and we did it! Humanity had officially made it into the next millennium. Hooray! Brad and Jennifer were the hottest celebrity couple, The Matrix had brought cyberpunk and PVC fetish wear into the mainstream, and Halle Berry won a Best Actress Oscar for the movie Monsters Ball. But more importantly to us, this was the era of next-gen gaming technology, the 6th generation of consoles. This was the era of PlayStation 2, and with it came news of Core Design's next big Tomb Raider project, something that they had been working on alongside Tomb Raider Chronicles, albeit with a new team. Everyone was excited to see what they were going to do with Lara on brand new hardware, and using a new engine that would allow for true fully 3D environments that weren't limited to the grid-based system from before.
This was the dawn of a new era for Tomb Raider. Finally, they had the power to be able to evolve the series' existing formula into something brand new and interesting, instead of having to work with what they had already and trying to just stretch and strain it to places that it just couldn't reach at all. I mean, with an advertising strategy for this game this aggressive, how could it fail?
Ads for this game were everywhere, and I really mean everywhere at the time. Magazines, TV commercials, brand deals, posters, and even several interviews with the dev team were circulated around both in written and video form. There was even a video interview with Lara herself where they ask her about the game and what happens in it.
Lara Croft, rumors are that you were dead, so what exactly happened to you in Egypt?
Events were a little hazy. I was trapped in an Egyptian tomb. But the Bedouin tribe rescued me and took me in.
Remember, this is a video game character and not an actual real-life celebrity. This is how much of an impact she had on pop culture at the time. There was nothing that you could do to escape from the fact that Lara Croft was back and more edgy, grungy, and badass than ever before. And the trailer for this game was a fantastic bit of marketing. It hooks you in with its whole fugitive on the run premise and then explodes into a montage of high-energy gunfights and explosions. It's awesome. Originally slated for a release in November of 2002, this game, which was to be the first next-gen iteration of the beloved character, had fans hotly anticipating its release. As that very release date drew closer, more and more teasers and screenshots of the game were being released, with gameplay footage even being demonstrated at several trade shows like E3. However, what was meant to be a showcase of playable levels at E3 of 2002 ended up being little more than a collection of short animation demos, which, for a game that was supposed to be due out imminently, was pretty concerning. Clearly the game was far from being finished and needed way more time in the oven to cook properly, so it was instead pushed back to a June 2003 release date, with North America being among the first to get to play it. Eventually though, Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness was released as a console exclusive for the PlayStation 2 on June 20th, 2003 for North America and June 30th for European territories. It was unfortunately to be the last Tomb Raider game that Core Design, the original creators of Tomb Raider, would ever work on. This game is notorious amongst the gaming community as being one of the worst sequel/Tomb Raider games that have ever been made. It's a game that left the series in such a bad state that Core Design had the IP taken away from them and given to Crystal Dynamics, the dev team behind the Legacy of Kain and Gex series. Yeah, let that part sink in.
Now I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Oh no, here comes yet another YouTuber to bash on this game to oblivion for that sweet, sweet hashtag nerd cred. Well, that's where you would be wrong. My mission with this video isn't to follow the same common narrative that you've seen dozens of times by other people that rag on about how bad the game was and that's it. I want to take a more constructive and positive approach and shed more light on what this game could have been. But at the same time, if something sucks, I'm still going to say it.
Before we get started, I just want to lay down some ground rules here so you know exactly what version I'll be covering and if I'll be adding anything too funky into the mix like fan patches or HD textures. For this video, all the footage that you'll be seeing is from the 2013 Steam PC version of the game, which is known to be the worst way to play this game by the community, so I've taken steps to rectify this. After much thought and internal deliberation, I decided to install some fan patches to the game, though I've elected to only install, in my eyes, essential fan patches that fix things like missing textures, flipped polygons, broken cutscenes, and various missing visual effects from the PC release like snow and heat waves. The reason I did this and not install everything is because I wanted to bring this version as close to the original PS2 release as possible, but not add anything that would otherwise enhance the game beyond its original release. This might seem like a bit of a cop-out for some, but I wanted to do the Tomb Raider community a solid by showcasing this game in the best light possible. That way, when the inevitable critiques do arrive, they'll feel more justified rather than harping on about visual goofs that everyone is more than aware of at this stage. Once I managed to make my way through the most overly complicated and jargon-filled setup menu I had ever seen in a PC game, seriously, just pause the video here and just use these settings, it will save you so much fucking time. I arrived at the game's menu screen. And oh my god, the music is just fantastic. I've not really had a chance to talk about Peter Connolly's work on the series, as the previous two games didn't really give him much room to shine in my opinion, but oh boy howdy does he shine bright here. I also really like the way this menu screen looks, and the graphics that they designed for the backgrounds and interface are very much in keeping with the occult imagery that you see throughout the game. It's very cool. All the pieces him and Martin Iveson have created for this game ooze this super broody and mysterious atmosphere that make you feel like you're playing a crime thriller of sorts, and it's all recorded with a live orchestra. I think this has to be one of my favourite interpretations of the main theme, and it sets the tone of the experience so well and just sounds so amazing.
But enough of me babbling on, let's finally take a look at Tomb Raider: The Angel of Darkness. Oh, I see what the problem is. I put the Japanese copy in instead.
The game immediately starts with a high-production cinematic cutscene where we zoom out from a mask that's on the floor, which turns out to be the jackal head from Von Croy's cane in Tomb Raider 4. Next thing we see is Lara and Von Croy getting into a heated argument after he desperately pleads for her help, but Lara isn't having any of it.
I'm tracking 5 Obscura paintings for a client called Eckhardt, but he's a psychopath.
Why should I care?
Because I'm being stalked. People are dying out there.
Handle it, Werner.
Lara, please. Look, go and see this woman, Carvier. She can help.
I'm going. Egypt, Werner. You walked away and left me.
Ah, brilliant! It's only been a few seconds and already this game's plot has completely shat itself.
Some of you might be wondering what I mean by this. Well, remember in the last game where a major part of the plot was that Von Croy was actively searching the Great Pyramid of Egypt for traces of Lara's body? Well, apparently this didn't happen, and instead it's been retconned into him abandoning her after the events of Tomb Raider 4.
But I do actually have an answer to that, and it relates back to French Shatner or Jean Yi from Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation. Basically, much like Chronicles, he had to be cut from this game due to legal reasons, so the choice was made instead to substitute him for Von Croy as the person that gets murdered in the beginning. So with that context in mind, this particular part of the story and why it's like this makes a lot more sense.
There was also an entire subplot that was completely cut from the game, which would have also explained how Lara survived Tomb Raider 4's ending. It essentially involves some shaman priestess who finds Lara at death's door in the Egyptian desert and then nurses her back to life with her tribe. But we'll get into all that cut content later, as there really is a lot to get through there. The last thing we see is Von Croy pulling a gun out on Lara and yelling, "Get out!" before the screen fades to black and we hear a few gunshots ring out in the darkness along with screaming. Von Croy is then revealed to have been killed, seemingly by Lara herself as she wakes up to find his dead body next to her and his blood all over her hands. Before she has a chance to think about what just happened, the police show up almost immediately and chase her out the area with a canine unit. But just as Lara enters another building to escape, she reaches a dead end with a window. And before she has any chance to react, the dogs jump her and push her out the window, as well as somehow removing her classic brown backpack from her. Right after that, we gain control of Lara for the first time in a full 3D, ungrid-based, believable-looking environment. And you have no idea how great it's going to feel playing a game with full 360-degree analog control. Let's do this!
To move around, use the cursor keys. You can also use the mouse to steer me left or right.
Oh, fuck. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Tank controls? Really? They just couldn't bring themselves to get rid of them, could they? Look, I can deal with classic tank controls fine enough. In fact, I think it's the best way to play this game as opposed to the camera directional controls found in the PS2 version. But I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't disappointed that they didn't go with a control scheme similar to what would end up being used in Tomb Raider Legend. You know, a full 360-degree analog stick movement control scheme with a fully rotating camera. There are some small changes to the button layout, like R1 being to draw your weapons out now instead of triangle, but the rest of the controls just feel so unnatural and bizarre to me. It's really hard to get across just how alien these controls feel without playing it for yourself, but if you've ever played a single one of the classic Tomb Raider games prior to playing this, or heck, even if you've gone from the newer games back to this one, you will know exactly what I'm talking about here. Everything from walking, looking around, jumping, and even grabbing ledges in this game has this really sluggish and almost laggy feel to it. It's almost to a point where it feels downright unresponsive at times, and that's not good for a platforming action-adventure game. I know that a newer control scheme is to be expected when making the jump from one generation to the next, but we've gone from a really rock-solid and competent control scheme that rewards players for taking the time to master it, to something that's extremely flaky, incompetent, and inferior in almost every single way.
You know how people often complain that the older Tomb Raider games are difficult to get into because Lara's controls are clunky and her movement is overly deliberate? I think I'd find it very difficult to disagree with them here.
But perhaps the most baffling design decision above everything else that we'll be covering today was the decision to include a half-baked RPG leveling system. There's a reason why the phrase, "I feel stronger now," has become a complete meme among the Tomb Raider community. It's because it perfectly encapsulates everything that's ridiculous about this game. Simple actions that we've had no problem putting off for 5 whole games with no issue, like pulling blocks, moving valves, and opening doors, fucking doors, are now tied to an arbitrary leveling system. How you level up your strength is that you come across an object that causes Lara to say,
I'm not strong enough.
and then you perform a random and arbitrary task within the immediate area to trigger Lara to say,
I feel stronger now.
and then once that's done, you can then go to that object that you couldn't move before and then move it to progress. This also applies to other forms of progression like having to jump larger gaps, sprinting, and shimmying across ledges. All are things that Lara has been more than capable of being able to do fine before, but are now tied to an invisible stats system and a stamina bar. Yes, the stamina bar is back here, and it's not used just for sprinting, but as a way to limit how long you can hold onto a ledge before having to let go. And it's complete bullshit. I can see what they were trying to do with this by giving Lara more of a sense of character progression, but to me, this goes against the whole acrobatic power fantasy that Lara as a character is supposed to be. I mean, maybe if her extended absence in Egypt was used to explain her lack of strength, it would have been a more acceptable thing, but as you'll see later, it still wouldn't fix things at all. And all of these elements don't really offer anything innovative to the series, but instead come off as an extremely contrived way to limit player progression. And nothing else. After you learn how to jump gaps, climb some fire exits, and search through some rando's grubby apartment for a Yorkie bar and some euros, you open a door to grab an item.
I feel stronger now.
Which somehow gives Lara the strength that she needs to be able to hang off the side of a building just that little teensy bit longer to be able to make it to another ledge without dying. Which I still somehow fucking did. But we're not done. We still have to learn about the brand new stealth mechanics, which are leagues better than Chronicles. For starters, it allows you to sneak up on any enemy that you like to take them out silently. And it works on every single enemy this time. Not just some. All of them. No rags required or neck breaking. And the other ability now is that you have the ability to hug walls and peek round corners. Unfortunately, this ability is only slightly helpful for stealth during one of the later levels when you're sneaking around the Louvre, but is extremely helpful when dealing with the game's janky controls when it won't let you stick to a wall to traverse a tiny ledge like it's fucking supposed to. Get on there! God damn it! Come on! Once you steal the key from the dude and escape the balcony, you're then spotted by the police chopper and then spend the next level trying to escape from being arrested through a derelict apartment block.
A few moments later.
Okay then, that was fucking pointless. So the police break the door down and use the poisonous gas grenades to try and smoke you out from it. Meanwhile, you're traversing up this shithole of a building, going through as many doors as you can find to find health items and other collectibles. Once you make it to the top and out to the rooftops, you're then chased by a police helicopter that also starts shooting at you. You then shimmy across from building to building and eventually arrive at a dead end where Lara brilliantly decides to take a leap of faith to grab this rusty drain pipe, and then acts completely surprised when it breaks and she falls to her death. Okay, no, she actually doesn't die. She lives. It's fine. It's all good. It's all good. Next, we arrive at the apartment of someone called Madame Carvier, a friend of Werner's who apparently recognizes Lara from the photo and description. The voice acting for Lara by Jonelle Elliott is pretty solid and easily one of my favorite interpretations of the character, but the rest of the cast's performances range from okay to just legendarily bizarre. I won't go into detail just yet as I don't want to spoil some of the surprises, but suffice to say there are some absolute gems here in this game.
Welcome to Paris.
Storytelling is something that takes center stage here, with the main narrative hook being a murder mystery that eventually evolves into a grand occult conspiracy. And I have to say I really like this new direction. I mean, yeah, it's not tomb raiding again technically, but it suits the character of Lara Croft and the series surprisingly well.
It's at this point that we're also introduced to the game's multiple dialogue system, which is a first for the series. It's not amazing and sadly doesn't really affect the outcome of the story, well, except for one instance at least, but it's a welcome addition that helps you engage more with the characters. Though I do find it hilarious how Lara can go from normal to genuine psychopath and then jarringly back to normal again in the space of a single sentence.
Did you kill him?
I can't remember. It's all a blur.
Miss Croft, I strongly suggest that you talk to the police.
If I wanted to kill Werner, I could have done that in Egypt.
You don't look convinced yourself.
I'm not going to waste any more time here. Do you have the notebook?
I do.
Madame Carvier reveals that Werner became fearful for his life after taking on a job to do with something called the Obscura paintings. He also left Lara a notebook for Carvier to keep safe and give to her, and even though you can act like a total angry jackass here, she still gives you the book because she wants to honor Werner's last wishes. Once she gives you the book, you're encouraged to leave before the police arrive, but hilariously you have all the time to go through this woman's apartment and take everything that isn't stuck down before you can leave. Like this bottle of champagne. I mean, yeah, that's gonna come in handy later, sure. The next day, Lara wakes up on the floor of a subway car like a hobo, and then interrogates an actual hobo for information about a man called Bouchard. Who is this person? No idea, but it's clear that he's linked to a local crime syndicate because everyone refuses to even talk about him. There's also some side plot about this serial killer called the Monstrum going around and murdering people in really grisly ways. And once you talk to this guy here, he mentions that Bouchard owns a local club and has staff dying left, right, and center, which kind of implies that this could be his handiwork as well. So it's time to wander the streets of Paris and do some detective work. Holy heck, that's a prostitute!
Hey, Janice!
Not a lot of passing trade at this hour.
It's early yet? Move along, ma chère. You make the place look crowded.
So Lara talks to Janice, the friendly prostitute, who apparently is still out working at 6 a.m. in the morning, and learns that the Serpent Rouge club behind her was owned by Bouchard, until he had to leave because of his men being murdered. She also mentions that she's heard on the radio that some woman called Carvier has also been murdered.
Carvier?
So yeah, that woman whose champagne that we stole earlier, yeah, she's dead. Gone. Done. Finito.
Watch out, my chère. There is a lot of sickos loose on the streets.
Yeah.
That's okay. Some of us like it that way.
I'm not even going to begin to try and unpack what she means by that.
So now we wander the clearly busy streets of Paris looking for clues, and for the two people that Janice has told us about. a cafe owner called Pierre, no, not that one, who was a former employee of Bouchard's club and has no chin, and the second guy called Bernard, who was a janitor of the club and is the infamous "leave me alone, I'm busy" guy.
Leave me alone, I'm busy.
And he will always say this no matter how many times you try to talk to him, even though he is clearly doing sweet fuck all here.
What the hell is he even doing here anyway? If he's waiting for Janice to show up, then I've got some bad news for him. Her park and ride service doesn't start until 6:30.
So because he's busy, you instead go to talk to the cafe owner to get information from them. And at one point she starts talking to him like she's selling a cleaning product to him or something.
No, I don't. But I do deal with problems. Sort them out.
What sort of problems?
What sort of problems do you have? Any situations need clearing up? Difficulties removed?
Well, he has the information that you do need, but before he'll tell you, you need to sneak into the Serpent Rouge club and retrieve a box for him. Once you're in, this is the first time the game encourages you to use the stealth mechanics, which you quickly come to realize isn't all that well implemented. It's clear that you're supposed to distract this guard so you can sneak past him and then into the office to get the key on his desk. But what happened instead was I pulled out my gun and the controls completely shat themselves so badly that it made me do that. You know how in past games how good the combat controls were? How you could always rely on them to target the enemy for you so you could focus on moving around them, and moving around them was super easy to accomplish? Well, for some reason, they decided to completely change your movement controls when you're in combat mode. At first, it seems like they're going to do a similar route to something like they do in Tomb Raider Legend or Ocarina of Time, where you'd lock onto an enemy and then you'd have full 360-degree movement around them, but the camera is always centered on that character. But instead, what we get is this weird amalgamation of tank controls and what I can only describe as fake 360-degree movement. And 90% of the time, it just barely works. It's like they tried to take the combat from the PlayStation 1 games, which were all built on this grid-based system, and then port it directly over into this one without knowing how to translate it properly into this game's engine. And boy, does it show. This to me is the biggest cardinal sin that this game commits. If you are going to make an action platformer, then the first thing that needs to be gotten 100% spot on are the controls. Without this, all of the time, all of the effort, all of the talent put into the rest of the game means jack shit, because all the person playing will be thinking is just how horrible and unenjoyable it is to play.
It's crazy how Lara's gone from being this agile badass who could clear an entire room full of bad guys without breaking a sweat, to this frail husk of her former self who moves around like she's got severe osteoarthritis and struggles to open doors. Possibly because of the arthritis.
You only get to use one pistol at a time in this game. You can't strafe, you can't even jump and shoot at the same time, which is just bizarre when you think about it. And the instant you holster your weapon, you're slammed back into the original tank controls, which fucks up your movement completely. So as a result, what should be exciting acrobatic combat scenarios devolve into these stilted and awkward encounters of rock'em sock'em fucking robots where you just stand still and take turns shooting each other because moving is just too much of a fucking risk to take here. So you shoot all the guards in the club and you slam on a fat beat and then climb a series of scaffolds with lights on to reach the top and then kick a walkway down so you're strong enough to open a door. Yes, a fucking door! And then you find the box that Pierre has been looking for hidden in one of the stage lights. Once back at the cafe, you hand the box over to Pierre, who's about to tell you where Bouchard is when he mentions that someone else was in asking about him as well.
No. It's just that someone else was asking for him. Just after you left.
Asking for Bouchard?
Yes, the customer who was sat in the corner, reading his paper.
Ah yes, Kurtis Trent, the answer to the question, what would happen if he threw the Prince of Persia into a hot topic?
Hey!
We'll get to Kurtis later, but first we need to head over to the apartment of this guy's ex-girlfriend so she can tell us where Bouchard is, who apparently was expecting some stranger in denim to just barge into her house looking for this guy because she instantly tells Lara where he is without so much as asking who she is and what she's doing in her house. So you shimmy around the rooftops to the church graveyard with the only information about where to find him being that he's in the basement of the mausoleum. Once inside, you tackle a series of short obstacles where your own shadow moves slower than you do. The fuck? Eventually, though, you make it to Bouchard's hideout, where you see a man on this bed here that looks like someone tried to melt the T-1000, and then you bust open this door to the next room and immediately start a conversation with somebody.
Okay, so I'm gonna just let the scene play out just to show you my genuine reaction to seeing this for the first time. This is real. I did not fake this.
What happened to your man in the room out there, Bouchard?
To Arno? You've got something to say about that? I doubt it. Get out of here.
What the fuck? So you speak to Bouchard, who sounds like a pack of Marlboro Reds fucked a bad Jean Reno impression, and if you pick the top answer here, this happens.
Don't jerk me around, Bouchard. I lost that friend yesterday.
You better watch your mouth, lady.
I'll watch nothing. I'm sick of your Parisian lowlife ways. I need results.
Jesus Christ, I'm not surprised that happened to you, love. You just basically went full Cole Phelps on an armed gangster and practically goaded him into doing it.
By the way, this is the only time that this could actually happen to you. The rest of the game, you're completely fine to choose other dialogue options and not have to worry about someone trying to kill you afterwards. But this being here sets a false expectation in your mind that it could happen to you again at any other point with other dialogue choices in this game. So after this, I was extra careful to make sure that I chose the right option going forward and didn't bother experimenting with more interesting options to see what would happen, just in case. Of course, the thing to do here is to be nice to the man with the gun who's the mob boss of this particular area, and if you are, you find out that Von Croy came to him to get access to archaeological dig sites at the Louvre. Lara also wants the same access as well as a new backpack and some guns too, so Bouchard tells her to head to the pawnbroker in the area and see a man called Renne to give him these passports in exchange for what she needs. But before we go to said pawnbrokers, we end up having to push this block here for reasons and talk to this guy, who for some reason, and I still don't know to this day why, Lara really wants his watch, like, really badly.
Hey lady, keep away from the ring.
Nice watch.
What?
Am I talking too fast for you?
Okay, sister, you're leaving now.
So I ended up betting on a boxing match and winning his watch, which I still had in my inventory by the time that the credits rolled. What the fuck do I need this for? I don't need a bloody watch. I have a Timex for Christ's sake. I know that you can sell items that you find to Renne the pawnbroker before this event for money, but the next time that you visit him after speaking to Bouchard, he's fucking dead.
Just a hunch, but I suppose it's too late to trade all this in, isn't it?
You arrive at the shop where some steampunk hipster walks past you, probably pissed that this wasn't an artisan coffee shop or something, and then you find Renne's shop completely destroyed and his body out back with a rune drawn around it. Suspicious. So now we're at yet another crime scene with a dead body next to a rune drawn in their own blood, and to make things super interesting, there's a fucking time bomb here too. Jesus, I better get out of here as soon as I can. Oh god, what's happening to the game? Why can I now see the inside of Lara's head? Oh god, that's better. I still have all the time in the world to open this guy's vault and take all of his guns and ammo.
Damn it.
Until I pick up the gun, which for some reason locks me in the room and sets the timer on the bong going. Oh god, 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 oh god. And while all of this is going on, we see Kurtis doing the super edgy character thing of crouching on a ledge and lighting a cigarette, dude. Just as Lara comes barreling out from the sewers along with a massive fireball. One slow-motion cigarette flick later, and a smirk, we see the steampunk hipster from earlier revealing his evil scheme to these people sitting around this table. You've got Ian McNeice from Ace Ventura 2, a Tim Burton character, and the bad guy from Die Hard 2. The hipster is someone who we find out is called Eckhardt, and tells the group that they've gathered 3 out of the 5 items called Obscura paintings, which brings them closer to their master plan of awakening something they call the Sleeper.
Esteemed Cabal members, the hour of your reward grows ever closer. As you know, we already possess 3 of the Obscura paintings. Our contact, Professor Von Croy, located the 4th one for us here in Paris.
What's with this guy's voice actor? He sounds like someone recorded Tony J under horse tranquilizers. You know, the guy from this meme.
We've got to have money.
What's funny about this scene is that they forgot to fix a bug that removed the texture for the painting that they're discussing, so it just looks like they're dramatically pointing at a blank wall.
We will gather at the Strahov. Gundenator. Master Eckhardt.
Okay, tell me I'm not the only one that thinks that that's totally Arnold Schwarzenegger. The face, the accent, everything about him is Arnie. Come on. I need your clothes, your boots, and your Obscura paintings. After that, we rejoin Lara, who's all geared up and ready to infiltrate the Louvre via the sewer system. And this entire section can be summed up like this.
It won't turn. My arms aren't strong enough. I think I'm strong enough to turn those valves. I can climb up on that. I can climb up on that. I can climb up on that.
Regardless, once you make it through to the end, you blow up a boiler to allow you access into the Louvre, and from here on, you're sneaking past all the guards and dodging lasers like you're reenacting the movie Entrapment or something. And by sneaking, I mean using the stealth mechanics for about 2 minutes before stumbling into a guard, start to panic, and then shoot him dead with the unsilenced weapon that you have equipped because it's the only thing that you have, and then you realize that you can run around the whole level killing them without any negative consequence. Outside of using the stealth takedown, there's no real benefit to using any of the other abilities, because it just doesn't matter. If you get spotted at all you have to do is shoot the guard that saw you, and then that's it. He doesn't call for backup. He doesn't do anything to raise the alert state. You're just immediately then back to sneaking like you were doing before. There's no heightened alert state and no sense of urgency or tension to the gun battles if you are seen. You still get access to the same areas, you still get access to the same items, and you still have to solve the same puzzles. The only part where I noticed the game actually punished you for being spotted was when I was dodging the lasers in one of the main galleries. But even then, once the door closes and the guard appears, all you have to do is kill him. And there you go. It's kind of sad, because this is one of my favorite parts of the game with some really cool areas to explore and fun environmental details. Like this painting of the Mona Lisa with composer Peter Connolly's face on it. I have no idea what that face is, but it is absolutely majestic. Once you've reached Carvier's office to collect her access card, you then use it to enter the dig site. Her office is filled with lots of details about the Obscura paintings, who the Cabal are, and stuff about an organization that opposed them called the Lux Veritatis. That kind of sounds like a dip that you put carrots in. A short puzzle and a few casual murders later, and we arrive at the first proper, actual, organic, fair trade, locally sourced tomb in this Tomb Raider game. And wow. Okay, I was not expecting it to look this good. I'm not sure if it's because I've spent the last month/couple of years playing the PlayStation 1 titles, but I have to say that this game was the first game in a long time to give me that wow factor with its tombs. The textures, the lighting, the verticality, the detailing are all great here, and I really enjoyed the puzzles here too. For the most part. The 4 trials that you have to complete are based on the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, which are very similar in concept to the ones in Tomb Raider 3. They've all been given really cool environmental details and designs that flesh them out and make them look like they have an interesting history behind them. And the atmosphere created by the music as well just ties this all up with this nice little bow at the top of it. It's really cool. And then once all those are finished and you have all 4 items, you can use them to open the door to the Boiler of Satan! Nah, I'm just kidding, it's a regular old evil boiler. But then once that's activated, you now have the means to climb to the very top of the room to access the room with the Obscura painting. But not before arbitrarily pushing a section of the wall here to increase your strength because reasons.
I feel stronger now.
Oh, shut up.
So after all that, what's waiting for you at the top? One of the worst boss fights I think I have ever played. So the idea here is that you're supposed to pick up the Obscura painting from one of the statues, but to make things interesting, it shifts from statue to statue every time you try to get close enough to grab it. And on top of all this is this red ghost bastard that constantly chases you around the room and can kill you near enough instantly if it so much as grazes past your thigh. Your first instinct is likely going to be to unload on it with everything that you've got with your shotgun. There's ammo for it all over the place, so it's obvious that that's what the developers wanted you to do. But because of the complete lack of any visual feedback, you'll have no clue if any of your shots are actually doing anything to him. He doesn't flinch or react to being shot, which at first makes sense because he's incorporeal, therefore there's nothing to hit. But then you realize that he can be shot, and that's how you take him down. Having nothing at all to indicate to the player that they're doing something to damage them is just baffling to me. To make things worse, this was when the combat controls decided to completely shit the bed and make things way harder to accomplish than necessary. Not being able to strafe around your target or jump and shoot in tandem like in previous games being a particular sore point, but perhaps the most egregious thing is how the controls completely pack up the moment you put your weapon away, which changed the game's definition of movement and caused me to walk into the ghost and effectively commit suicide. Every single time.
I've never known an action game to do this. Imagine if you were playing the original games and it suddenly changed control schemes like this when you pulled out your weapons. Playing this game feels like that level at the end of Rayman 1 where your controls are reversed. but it's the entire fucking game.
I decided to consult the Stella Fairy again for assistance, but turns out that even Stella found this section to be complete bullshit as well, and I was only able to barely make it out from this section even after cheesing the ghost's AI to avoid taking damage. Turns out if you crawl on the ground, for some reason he can't hit you, so you can use this to avoid his attacks and then close in on the painting. Then once close enough, save. And then you can shoot the ghost with the shotgun to stun it. Then, and only then, you can walk up to the painting to collect it. Otherwise, it will randomly change to a different statue again. How will you know if you've stunned it and that it hasn't just randomly stopped moving? You won't. You just kind of have to guess which one it actually is and try going for the painting regardless to see what happens. But eventually I was able to take the painting, and in true Indiana Jones style, the tomb begins to flood and I had to swim out to find the exit before I was killed. Once you do find it, you're back at the dig site, not via the entrance that you spent time trying to unlock, but instead out of a metal hatch that the dig team fenced off in the corner of the room.
So, what was the point of that elaborate door puzzle then? You're telling me that they saw a conveniently placed hatch on the ground just sitting there and decided to not check it out before fencing it off?
So it's back to the Louvre now, where we kill more innocent guards just doing their jobs, and then Arnie's SWAT team drop in and gas the whole place. Come with me if you want the paintings. So now you have to hightail it over to Carvier's office and get a gas mask from one of the other rooms, and you're not going to believe what happens next.
My foot speed has increased. Hold down the sprint button to run faster.
Your footstep speed has increased.
My foot speed has increased.
Your footstep speed has increased.
My foot speed has increased.
You opened a cupboard door and suddenly have the ability to run faster? Fuck me, if I known it was been that easy, I would sign up for the Olympics by now. Watch out, Usain. Here I come, motherfucker.
Now armed with the power of running, we can now make our way out of the Louvre to escape. But just as we go to do so, we're nearly decapitated by the glaive. From Krull? Huh? And it's Kurtis again, who gets the jump on Lara to disarm her and steal the painting. Now, this moment is supposed to imply that there's a layer of sexual tension between them, but you watch this back and tell me that you think that, because to me it just comes off as incredibly creepy. Oh, and side note, notice how she only ever uses one gun, but when he disarms her, she's suddenly using two. And they're both totally different to anything I've ever picked up or equipped. So all that's left is to watch Lara chase Kurtis to get the painting back, and apparently he has the Force, and can also survive large drops. So it beggars belief that moments later Lara finds him knocked out on the floor, and by this guy. Who the fuck is this guy? And why does he look like an edgy Mr. Bean?
Magic.
So moments later we're woken up by Bouchard, who somehow knew we were going to be here despite never being told so immediately we're suspicious of him. He agrees to take us back to Von Croy's apartment so we can go rooting through for more clues as to what the hell is actually going on here. Also, suddenly we're now wearing sunglasses. Because reasons. Oh look, it's the intro cutscene, except we have context now, and we also get to see more of what actually happened to Von Croy. Turns out he didn't pull a gun out on us, but was instead trying to defend himself against Eckhardt, and in the ensuing struggle he is strangled and killed by him. Or shits himself, it's kinda hard to tell with that scream.
No! So the big reveal here is that we weren't responsible for Von Croy's death, but we were in fact framed for his murder by this Cabal cult, which to me is kind of a weak revelation. Yeah, it clearly outlines them as the main villain of the story and proves that Lara is innocent, but I personally feel it would have worked better had we been shown that Lara did actually kill Von Croy, but something isn't quite right about her. That way later on, when there's another revelation about who the real killer is, it would have had much more impact on the player as a result.
And that's not to say that I want Lara to become a cold-blooded killer for the sake of it, I'm just suggesting that it could have been a much better narrative hook if they'd kept going with the whole did she, didn't she narrative to keep the player guessing and invested. But before we have time to think about that, this guy appears and starts trying to kill us. Surprise, surprise! Bouchard was really a dick all along and sends this guy called Zikliner to try and take us out. But after finding Von Croy's Luger and a whole load of ammo, seriously, how the hell did this guy die again? We're able to escape his apartment and chase the cleaner down.
I'm not strong enough.
Are you fucking kidding me? Why does this door have to be too hard for Lara's delicate little old lady arms to open? Why not just have her say that it's locked? Not something like, I'm not strong enough, which instantly makes us seem like some kind of frail and totally useless old woman. Eventually, after going through the open doorways, because we wouldn't want to break a nail or mess up our hair, would we, girls? We pick up the assassin's machine gun and manage to dodge all of the tripwire explosives to take him out. Oh, and by the way, Lara can go prone and crawl on the floor in this game. Did you know about that? Because I certainly didn't. Bouchard then calls the guy's phone, only for Lara to pick up instead, and then threaten vengeance for his betrayal, but not before finding out that he's off to Prague for reasons unknown. So it's off to Prague in search of Bouchard and also to find out what in the dickens this cult called the Cabal are actually up to. It's snowing, so of course you don't have a jacket, but you thankfully still have all of your gear from Paris. Wow, airport security sure was fucking lax back in that day, wasn't it? You talk to a nearby reporter who's investigating a monstrum crime scene and convince him to let you see some of his dossiers, which for some reason Lara finds extremely disgusting.
You call these dossiers? Yuck!
And I have no idea why she reacts this way.
Ugh, you call this a dossier? This is a scrapbook at best, dear boy. Now, if you excuse me, I'm off to rinse my eyes out with bleach, you troll. Good day, good sir. I said good day.
You unsavory little runt.
It's here where Lara learns who Eckhardt is, and that amazingly all 6 top members of the Cabal are here in Prague at this exact very moment. Gee, what an amazing coincidence. Whilst we wait for LA Noir Super Mario to fetch us an access code to their base, we sneak into the nearby monstrum crime scene to snoop around. It's here where you also run into Bouchard again, who you handcuff to a radiator and interrogate for information. He tells you pretty much everything, what the paintings are for, why Von Croy was killed, and also reveals their ultimate plan to revive the extinct Nephilim race through a creature called the Sleeper, or the Cubiculum Nephili. At first this might seem a lot to take in at once, but the game has actually done a pretty good job of sprinkling hints about this information throughout the different locations. Sure, it was stuff that you could potentially miss if you weren't thorough enough, but it's great to see it included as a reward for players who took their time to explore all their surroundings thoroughly.
My strength is increasing.
Please shut up.
A short puzzle later, with what looks like the most inconvenient way to open a window I think I've ever seen, we find the next engraving which gives us the location of the next Obscura painting. But when we return to Bouchard, we find him dead in a closet.
So much for surviving, I guess.
What the hell's going on around here?
Once outside, we meet Detective Mario again, who gives us the access code to the Cabal stronghold called the Strahov. From here, we make our way through a warehouse of armed guards, guard dogs, and laser traps, and eventually move enough boxes to be able to build our strength enough to then enter the ventilation system. Here we see Arnold Schwarzenegger has captured Detective Mario, and leaves Eckhardt to zap him with his magic stone hand and paint a rune on the wall with his own blood. Shortly after that, Lara cuts off power to the whole facility, which deactivates the laser barriers, but also sets free all the monsters they had locked up. Smart! From here, the game's environments drastically shift in style to a more fantastical science fiction-y aesthetic. Several of the rooms in the supposedly underground layer have this interesting mixture of classical Prague architecture and high-tech electronics. And I have to say, I really like the design of this area. Wait, actually, hold up, can we just rewind that for a second? What the hell? Since when was Lara wearing shorts? I was wearing trousers just a moment ago, and now I'm wearing camo shorts? The first room you encounter starts you off in an airlock of sorts before presenting you with something that looks like straight out of Arkham Asylum's garden house. Oh yeah, and you bump into Ian McNeice here, who tells Lara all about their secret evil plan to revive the long-extinct Nephilim race by using the Sleeper and becoming immortal.
That is impressive. How are you going to manage that?
Meister Eckhardt is about to return the Nephilim race to glory. For our part in that triumph, he will grant us immortality.
If I had a coconut for every time some lunatic said something like that.
You have a lot of coconuts? What?
Lara then gets a face full of green gas that nearly incapacitates her, but instead of it knocking her out so she can get captured, it's just a smoke bomb of sorts so he can leave the room and she's totally free to keep going. Okay then. The next few rooms have you fighting these weird creatures that are the results of Fulton Greenwall's experiments. One room has you fighting a bunch of plant creatures as well as some plant-human hybrids. Another room has you navigating across to the other side whilst trying to avoid dropping into this pool of water here with this massive sea beast inside of it, which no matter how many bullets I tried plugging into the damn thing didn't seem to want to die. And then next you're confronted by two gigantic tree roots which are blocking the exits, which you then have to work out how to kill by turning certain knobs in a certain order to release gas to poison it, and it's incredibly easy to work out. #BigBrain. Then once you're finally past all of that, you enter the main chamber, which is kind of like a gigantic greenhouse of sorts. There are multiple ladders to climb, walkways to navigate across, and multiple guards patrolling the area who you have to kill to steal keycards from to gain access to the main facility. It's also here where you encounter one of those arbitrary progression barriers where you have to jump across one specific gap for Lara to then gain the ability to jump further distances, which doesn't make a whole lick of sense, but by this point I've pretty much resigned myself to just accepting that this is a thing. Once you collect the hidden security card near the top walkway, you spy on Plant Man, who gets collared by Eckhardt about the power going out for the facility. And everything in this cutscene happens so fast it's almost comical. Eckhardt asks why the power is out, Arnie then locks down the rest of the area, then Boaz comes out confessing that she didn't destroy the prototype Nephilim. This happens, then this guy just magically shows up from out of nowhere. The fuck did he get here? And before you know it, Boaz is being fed into whatever the hell this thing is for disobeying Eckhardt.
Pod, hey? Looks more like a Boaz constrictor to me, am I right?
Once you gather 3 card keys, you unlock the door to the next area of the base, but just as you begin to pass through the airlock, the door behind you locks and traps Lara inside. It's Kurtis Trent again, who explains why he's trapped Lara in there because she's been a naughty girl and needs a timeout to think about what she did. So now, in a shocking turn of events, we're playing as a brand new character for the first and only time in the series' current history. Controlling Kurtis is pretty much the same as Lara, except he can't swim, sprint, and doesn't need any of those pesky strength upgrades because he's such a big, strong man! Sorry. But he does have the unique ability to do something called far-seeing. What this allows him to do is project himself away from his physical body in order to get into places that he can't otherwise reach. This allows him to do things like phase through doors to get door codes or pass through small gaps to get door codes.
Okay, well, it's not the most amazing of abilities, and you only get to use it a couple of times via cutscenes, but I'd argue that this was the first true innovation for the series since its inception.
This is mostly because, like with a lot of this game, it didn't have enough time to be fully realised. Originally, Kurtis's powers were supposed to be fully controllable instead of being limited to just cutscenes. He was even going to have powers like producing a psychic shield to absorb gunfire, and even use that Kroll-looking blade from the cutscenes to fight with too. But sadly, all you really get to do with him is punch a few crazy people and shoot them. Then stand by some doors with your arms out whilst the camera does all the cool stuff. Yes, you heard me correctly, we are now inside an insane asylum shooting crazy mutant people in straitjackets. It's certainly quite the change in tone. It's also here where we discover the extent of Boaz's experimentation, as a quick chat with one of the still sane locals reveals that she'd been capturing people for live study and to feed to her creatures for months. Nice. The next series of rooms has you fighting these weird creatures that are the results of Boaz experimenting to try and artificially create the Nephilim race without the sleeper, which you'd think would make them a similar threat to the Atlanteans from Tomb Raider 1, but in reality they're about as interesting to fight as any other enemy, to be honest. Later, after making our way further in and witnessing one of the strangest crouch walk animations I've ever seen, we arrive just in time to witness the proto-Nephilim eat this scientist man. And for some reason, the sound for this cutscene completely gave out, so I was left in total silence until it had finished. I have no idea why this happened. The remainder of this segment has you hunting it down with a boss fight against it to finish it off for good. This fight is just so confusing because of a number of different factors, all of which could have easily been handled better if they had, once again, been given more time. The idea is to deal enough damage to incapacitate it, and then once it's down, run up to its stomach to finish it off with your special daggery thing. But the problem is that you won't be able to actually finish it off until the game lets you, which means that you'll likely end up wasting ammo and thinking that you can't kill it because it will just keep getting back up again. When in reality, all you really need to do is repeat the same actions a few times so the game will trigger the cutscene where you can finally finish it off. So now that's dead, we finish our little detour by turning the power back on and heading back to where Lara is. Lara, of course, is waiting for him in the ceiling like a fucking ninja, and the two of them tussle around a bit before Kurtis explains the Cabal's whole plan. Turns out he's the last surviving member of the Hakuna Matatas, or whatever they're called, who were an order of 12th century warrior monks that had been fighting the Cabal and hiding their funky paintings from them for years. He also explains that these daggers called the Periap shards are the only things that can kill Eckhardt, but all three are needed in order to do so. So she decides to give him back the dagger that she stole from him back in Paris, and the two of them decide to team up to search for the last painting and the third shard in Eckhardt's lab. Of course, Eckhardt and William Sadler from Die Hard 2 here are watching them on a security feed and know everything about their plan. But it's okay because they actually need to get her inside the Lux vault under their base and retrieve the painting for them. How convenient! The next area has you feeding a giant evil fish beast to eventually gain access to a wetsuit. Oh look, I now have 2 pistols again, even though I never used them, and can't in this game without hacking them back in.
Why she needs a wetsuit at this stage is honestly beyond me, but hey, Tomb Raider 2 reference, am I right?
I suppose now would be a good time to mention the underwater swimming controls in this game, wouldn't it? They're pretty bad. Not horrendously bad, as it's easy enough to maneuver and get around, just not as good as before either. Firstly, whenever you fall into a pool of water, for some odd reason, you're instantly made to face upwards, which also snaps the game's camera that way too. This often led to me becoming extremely disoriented and spending more time than I needed having to work out where the hell I actually was before being able to work out how to proceed. Plus, it happens so fast you won't even realize that that's what's happened for a good few seconds, and will likely think that you've just glitched the game in some way. I know I did. Secondly, getting out of said pools of water can often be a pain in the arse because of how downright unresponsive the controls of this game are and how particular you have to be with them. Take this section here where all I want to do is get out from this pool. I'm facing a flat ledge that's perfectly climbable with no obstructions and pressing the right button to be able to climb it. Turns out it was because I happened to not be at what the game deemed as the right ledge, so it wouldn't even let me out. Fucking genius. After finding an aqualung left in a cave, why there wasn't one with the wetsuit at the diving station I have no idea, you break through into a large puzzle room where you have to move statues whose names start with the corresponding letter on the mural to pass through to the next area. When you get here, do yourself a favor and save, because this jumping puzzle is an absolute bastard to get past, and I swear there's no way to work this out without using just trial and error to do so. If you did do this without that, then more power to you. Oh, and if you've ever wondered what's up on that ledge there, it's another aqualung that you can use for swimming, which you never ever do in this game ever again from this point onwards. Why the fuck is it there? Finally, we arrive at the Lux Veritatis vault, where the last Obscura painting is... Wait, hang on a minute, this isn't a vault? This is the library from Harry Potter. How else do you explain all the candles being lit and the fireplace still burning? Well, unless you mean to tell me that these skeletons are the ones that have been keeping it going this whole time. They don't very much look like the type to enjoy reading either. So you collect the last painting, which of course puts out the fireplace so you can crawl through and escape. Then after a short swim, you arrive back at the facility where Eckhardt has been waiting for you.
Congratulations, Miss Croft. You are positively Amazonian. That vault has defeated us for months.
How? It's a legit question. How has that vault defeated them for several months when they have a perfectly safe and better entrance to it that they clearly already know about? They could have just sent a diving team down there and they would have had the painting without having to go through all the puzzles in no time. Done. And they wouldn't even have to trick Lara into doing it for them in the first place. Wait, that's actually kind of a bit of a plot hole now that I think about it.
Of course, Kurtis has been captured, so Lara has to give up the Obscura painting she found to Eckhardt in exchange for his life. Naturally, she does this, and Kurtis is begrudgingly spared, but not before Gunderson is told to release Boaz to finish them both off. Boaz, after surviving her encounter with the pod, is now a gigantic abomination thing, so the two of them are going to have to take it down. But not before Fulton Greenmore here is also chucked into the pit and immediately gobbled up by Boaz for also failing Eckhardt, I guess. This serves as enough of a distraction so Kurtis can boost up Lara onto the balcony using the Force, and you're left to fight Boaz as Kurtis. Oh boy. This fight is yet more proof that the combat controls in this game are complete arse. For starters, she moves way faster than your character can move, meaning it's impossible to get out of the way of her attacks without being harmed. Then, to make things worse, her projectiles are also difficult to avoid properly, and because you can't strafe around her and shoot, or jump and shoot, there is no way to fight back without leaving yourself totally vulnerable. But perhaps the cherry on this shit sundae is that she has multiple weak points that you have to take out in order to properly defeat her. But of course, in true Angel of Dark fashion, when they become active, the game doesn't auto-target them for you, so instead you have to know to press a button to switch targets, and that multiple targets are now available to shoot.
Ah yes, target switching, a feature that I'm often reminded of in my comments section as a thing that's kind of existed in previous games, and I just didn't know about it and didn't ever use, so fair play everyone, you got me there. Oh, and sideways swimming too, that's another thing I didn't know about, so well done you.
But target switching on a singular target was, to my knowledge, a new thing for the series, and actually, in theory, adds more depth to the combat. Having multiple ways to target an enemy could have been a great way to improve the combat, whilst also adding more options to the game's stealth mechanics too. So things like targeting the head or a person's weapon to disarm them, that kind of thing would have been great. But sadly, the reality is that this was all lumped into just one boss fight very late into the game, which resulted in multiple players that I've spoken to becoming extremely frustrated with this fight. I was actually very lucky to have multiple people give me the heads up with this boss fight beforehand, so I was able to get by with it no problem. But man, do I feel sorry for anyone going into this completely blind. So you woof down a whole bunch of chocolate bars and eventually beat her, but of course she has a second form to beat. And it's incredibly anticlimactic. But plot twist, just as Kurtis lets his guard down after checking the body, she springs back up again and impales him with her stinger. Kurtis manages to behead her with his glaive thingy before eventually succumbing to his wounds and passing out on the floor.
Say goodbye to Kurtis, everyone, because that's the last time that we will ever see him in any Tomb Raider game. Well, outside of some online fan art, that is.
So here we are. We're at the last level of the game, and now Lara has to pass through a couple more platforming challenges to enter Eckhardt's lab to find the last Periap shard. I have to say I quite like the design of this section, even if some things don't make much sense.
My legs feel stronger. Maybe I'll make that jump.
Eckhart's lab was a particular highlight for me because of the amount of character that it had, and the puzzle that requires you to do a little light alchemy fits the character really well. Once you've cooled down the water enough to allow you to swim down and collect the last shard, you exit the lab via a long slope and arrive at the arena for the final boss. Eckhardt assembles the 5 pieces of metal from the Obscura paintings to form an item called the Sanglyph, which he then uses to begin reviving the sleeper, but not before doing an impression of Arnie's battle cry from Predator for some reason.
So now we have a boss fight against Super Eckhardt, and it's incredibly anticlimactic, to say the least.
For starters, you're stuck in the middle of the room and have to wait for an opening just to attack him. So all you can really do until then is just stand there and wait for him to awkwardly shuffle around the edge and dodge whatever attacks he throws at you, which are incredibly easy to avoid, I might add. When you do eventually get a chance to attack him, it's so quick to take him out that I'm actually baffled at why this character would think to keep doing this. He creates 3 copies of himself and they all run into the middle to fuse together, and then you can either kick him or shoot him down. He does unleash a large attack at the same time, but it's just so laughably easy to avoid that you don't even need to move much, if at all, to do so.
What's crazy is that if you read the notes that are online about what was cut from this game, this fight sounded incredible. Instead of fighting him yourself, Eckhardt was going to conjure up realities from Lara's past instead to try and kill her Nightmare on Elm Street style. One was going to be the plane crash from the Himalayas from her original backstory, the second was going to be dinosaurs from Peru, and the third was going to have her escape from the Great Pyramid of Egypt again from the last revelation. How fucking badass does that sound?
So each phase has you stabbing him with one of the shards, and once you've done this 2 times, you get to finish him off with the third. However, before you can land the killing blow, William Sadler steps in and does it for you, revealing that he was the mastermind all along, and that he's actually been a shape-shifting Nephilim, and Eckhardt has been secretly working for him, but didn't realize it this whole time. What a twist? But the grand reveal of this game is that this dude here was actually the person who killed Von Croy, and not Eckhardt, but for some reason he decided to disguise himself as Eckhardt anyway, and it makes no sense.
Which is a bit of a shit twist, to be honest. Why reveal that it was really this dude disguised as Eckhardt that killed von Croy all along, when it doesn't really do anything to change Lara's motivations to stop the Cabal? It's treated like this big moment that's supposed to explain everything, when really all it does is just overly complicate things, and kind of needlessly at that. It's almost like a plot twist for the sake of a plot twist.
So now we're fighting this guy who flies around the room in a pose like someone forgot to animate him and fires magic projectile thingies at you that blast you back a bajillion feet if they connect. Naturally, much like Set, he's completely invincible to bullets or being damaged in any way, so instead you have to find a way up to the top of the room and use the magic lotus root Eckhardt had to take him out instead. So you walk up to where the sleeper is, and then that's the end of the game. Yep. No player input required here, just walk up to the big evil thingy and you just get the final cutscene. That's it. Lara is now suddenly hanging off the sleeper's leg, which she then places the sandglyph onto, and that for some reason causes the sleeper to shoot a beam of light into William Sadler's face and they both explode? Okay. Then for the final scene of the game and for core design's Lara Croft, we see her return to the pit where Kurtis fought Boaz. She notices his glaive on the ground next to a puddle of his blood, and just as she picks it up, it immediately activates and begins to point her in the direction of the open blast door where Boaz came from. As the blades retract, she smiles knowing that Kurtis is still probably alive out there somewhere. And then as the music dies down, she walks off into the darkness, her theme playing softly on a single violin. Up until covering Angel of Darkness for this video, I had never played this game before from start to finish. At all. I've heard all the complaints, seen all the videos online, read all about how much of a train wreck this game ended up being, but all I could feel whilst playing this game was just sad. This game was clearly meant to be a huge step forward from previous games, to be the long-lamented, bold and innovative entry that critics were craving. But because of a myriad of multiple issues like multiple delays, pressure from IDOS, mismanagement on Core's part, poor staff morale, long work hours, and problems developing on the PS2 hardware, it all led to Angel of Darkness turning out like it did, which is a massive shame. Every element of this game, from the controls to the story, the stealth to the stupid RPG mechanics, felt half-finished, which really let down the whole experience. With all that being said, there were things that I did unironically enjoy in this game. I really dug the murder mystery element to this story, and I actually think it suits the Tomb Raider series really well. In fact, I kind of wish the whole game's story revolved around it more, and that it took its time to build tension rather than blowing its load right after you set foot in Prague. Maybe with the benefit of hindsight, the dev team should have just limited Angel of Darkness to just taking place in Paris to make the whole thing feel a little bit more focused, rather than just spreading themselves too thin by being overly ambitious and having multiple countries for her to visit.
Especially when you consider that this game was part one of an intended trilogy, so logically it would have made more sense to have this first part be the way to test the water with the new technology of the PlayStation 2. Then, if that was successful enough and it sold well, that's where you would expand upon your ideas and experiment more in the sequels.
There were actually meant to be more for her to visit in this game. Germany and Turkey were also places that she was meant to go to, but because of time constraints and everything else, it had to get cut. Hence why we only got a small snippet of Prague at the end. I liked the dialogue system, and I thought that it added a nice level of variety to encounters, even if at times it made Lara sound almost hilariously bitchy. Though I feel if there were more options that could have resulted in more drastic consequences, like the one with Bouchard, it could have made things really interesting. A lot of the environments were also quite enjoyable to look at, and actually held up surprisingly well despite the odd occasional visual glitch. The tombs were a particular highlight and were really interestingly designed, with cool traps and quirky puzzles, though I still found it hilarious that even on PlayStation 2, Tomb Raider still doesn't know how to get lava looking right. The music and the sound design was fantastic, and I actually now consider Angel of Darkness's soundtrack to be one of the best in the series, hands down. But again, this praise gets hugely undercut by just how terrible some of the fundamental elements of this game are. The controls are the biggest one for me. They're extremely clunky and unresponsive most of the time and pale in comparison to its PlayStation 1 counterpart. The combat controls especially had my jaw on the floor most of the time with how bad it was. I was in a constant state of disbelief thinking that anyone could ever think that this was okay. And this is even after I installed a community-made patch for the PC version I used to record this footage. God help anyone who plays this game vanilla.
And I just wanted to give a massive shout out to all the extremely passionate and dedicated members of the community surrounding this game. All the people that have spent time learning how to take this game apart and put it back together again just to fix things like missing textures, controls, and lots of different things. You guys and gals have my uttermost respect and have made not just playing this game, but all the previous Tomb Raider games on PC far more accessible and enjoyable to do so. So thank you so much. You lot do the work that Crystal Dynamics and Eidos do not, so thank you.
I also wanted to take time to give a big shout out to the crew over at the Dark Angel Symphony, which is a crowd-funded reimagining of Peter Connolly and Martin Iveson's music from The Last Revelation, Chronicles, and Angel of Darkness. They've been really supportive of the channel and were even kind enough to send me a care package full of their merchandise that you can buy at their store. They sell t-shirts with different designs, all the remastered music on CD, vinyl disc, a 5.1 surround sound version on DVD signed by the game's writer, a large double-sided poster with awesome hand-drawn art. Seriously, look at this thing. A huge book full of sheet music for all the tracks, and perhaps the best piece of merch that they sent me was this leather-bound Kurtis Trent journal, which is full of original sketches, maps, character profiles, and personal musings from the man himself, and all written and drawn by the game's writer, Murty Schofield. But perhaps the most interesting part is how it also comes with a foreword from Murty detailing his plans for the character. So if you fancy buying some of this merch yourself, I've linked the website in the description below for you to go and visit. There are way more items on their website to check out, and it's all absolute gold for fans of this game. I can't recommend the project to classic Tomb Raider fans highly enough, and once again, thank you to Ash, Tina, Peter, and the rest of the team for supporting me and for sending me this. Ah, yes, Kurtis Trent. Look, I'm sorry, shippers, you're gonna hate me for this, but Kurtis Trent just did not do it for me. I mean, on paper, he was an interesting character and his force powers had fun potential, but in practice, he comes across as just some edgy dude with superpowers and a dangerous-looking fidget spinner. Had this game been more successful and we'd gotten his planned spin-off game as well as the sequels, maybe this would have changed. But here, sorry, this ain't it, Chief. Lastly, let's get back to Lara herself. Her actual design in this game is perhaps the biggest waste of potential in this entire game. I love everything about this design. It's just such a perfect glow up from her PlayStation 1 model that it's just such a damn shame that it's limited to just being used in this game, and also as an unlockable costume for the Reboot series. But we'll get to that. This game's ending felt like an extremely bittersweet moment for me. On the one hand, it was good to be finally finished with this game. Then on the other hand, I knew that this was the final adventure that I would have with this version of Lara Croft that I grew up with. Even though originally this ending was meant to tease a follow-up game to continue its story, now when viewed with the knowledge of everything that has happened to the series post-release, it takes on a very different and almost meta context now. The whole scene almost feels like we're watching from Core Design's perspective as they are powerless to stop Lara, their creation, their legacy, from being taken away from them. All whilst a variant of the Tomb Raider 3 version of her theme plays like we're being given one last blast of comforting nostalgia before our time with her is up. Having her smile before disappearing into the darkness to never be seen again feels almost tragically poetic to me. This feels like we are having to say our final goodbye. We don't want her to leave, but sadly we have no choice.
Honestly, it's hard to be mad at this game for what it is. Yeah, it's a bit of a half-baked broken mess at times, but you can tell that there's potential for something greater here, something way more compelling. And with all the documented behind-the-scenes drama, the different builds of the game that exist, the cut content that is still being discovered by the community to this day, and all the expanded story details, it's really easy to see why people hold a deep passion for this game. Or at the very least the idea of what this game could have been.
While sales of this game were a pretty modest 2.5 million units worldwide at the time of release, it was not enough to save core design. Soon after its release, the critics started dropping scores for this game, and it became pretty clear that this was not the smash hit that Eidos and the management at Core were hoping for.
Eventually, after distancing themselves from core design after multiple negative reviews and public feedback, Eidos decided to hand control of the Tomb Raider IP over to their American studio, Crystal Dynamics, who would then go on to remake the series in their own image. Their own image. No. It can't be.
Definitely sure that curses don't exist in real life.
I'm alive. Like a game, two parts of me that has been missing. You're...
Just for once, it'd be nice to walk into a room and not have the statues try to kill me. I'd forgotten how much I missed this. Feels good to be packing again.
Feel stronger now.
I would be lost, drifting alone, floating up high, time after time, and there you'd be, shining